Do you all see my PowerPoint?
Yes, we can.
Okay, fantastic. So as mentioned, my name is Daniela Coleman. I specifically work as Director of Admissions and Recruiting at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. So I am the Admissions Director at an American graduate program in international relations. I myself am based in Europe, in Bologna, in Italy, where our Johns Hopkins SAIS has a European campus. We actually also have campuses in Washington, D.C. and in Nanjing, China. But today I want to briefly talk more in general terms about what a degree is in international relations at a master's level. I've prepared a PowerPoint presentation. It's going to last about 15 minutes or so, and I hope this session is going to be interactive, so there is the opportunity for you to submit questions in the Q&A. You probably want to wait till the end, because if you ask a question, I'm sure I'm going to cover a lot of stuff here, but I really do hope that you do ask questions and use me as a resource. I'm not just here to talk about Johns Hopkins SAIS. I really want to give you the tools to think more broadly about what a graduate program in international relations is all about. Okay, so today, obviously, if you're joining this session, you're thinking about whether or not you should go for a graduate degree in international relations. And so you may need a degree in IR, considering what professional opportunities you want to pursue. You may not. So I think the first bullet point that we want to address is, why would you pursue a degree in international relations? Why would you pursue a master's level education? Once you've figured out that, yes, I do need a degree and a graduate degree in an IR, I think the next logical question is, well, what is the right program for me? And I will talk about some of the things that you should think about if you are convinced, if you are ready, if this is the right choice for you to think about a graduate degree in international relations. Of course, every program is slightly different, and the admissions process for all programs is going to change. But there tends to be things that most graduate programs, particularly American graduate programs in international relations, look for. I obviously want to give you tips for success. My goal here, again, is to make you a strong candidate, to give you sort of a bird's eye view, what admissions officials look for. So if you're thinking about graduate school, at least you approach the application process confidently and well prepared. And of course, I do want to address questions at the end of this presentation that you may have as well. So I guess the first question is, I would love to ask, for those of you that are joining us today, if you could send in the chat box, what is your dream job? You know, if you had a magic wand, what would you want to become? And there's no such thing as a wrong answer. This could be your childhood dream, maybe when you were 10 years old. This could be what you want to do now. If you could just put it in the chat box. Let me know, what would you like to be when you grow up? I'm going to give everyone a few moments, and I hope that you're not shy. If you could all maybe submit something in the chat box so I can get a sense from the audience, the things that people want to do. Maybe you want to be a lawyer or foreign service officer, or I think I see people putting this in the Q&A. That's fine too. A lobbyist. We have someone that wants to be a lobbyist. That's great. Anybody else? Anybody else want to let us know what your dreams are, what you're thinking about professionally? Multicultural atmosphere, wants to work in an international organization related to gender equality. Okay. We have someone that wants to find the best solution to solve difficult situations in a multicultural atmosphere. Fantastic. Okay. So the reason why I asked this question is, when I went to graduate school 20 years ago, people used to think that the only people that went to get a degree in international relations were people that obviously only wanted to work at an international organization like the United Nations or the European Union, or people that wanted to be foreign service officers, work in the diplomatic service. And the reason why I asked this question is that the field of IR is very broad. So unlike a business program where you're only doing accounting or finance or law school, where you're basically training to be a lawyer, IR programs are much broader. So our graduates are working in institutions like government and politics. People that apply to graduate programs in international relations are activists. They're interested in change. They're interested in, NGOs. We have people that go to programs in international relations, maybe because they want to become journalists, foreign correspondents. We have people that want to work at multilateral organizations, whether it's to work at the EU or other multilateral organizations in and around Brussels or around the world. We have people, for example, that pursue graduate degrees in international relations because they want to do climate change, or maybe they're interested in financial services. They're interested in markets, but not just hardcore banking. Maybe they want to do, looking at countries, looking at global risk, for example. We also have people that are very interested in development work, working in emerging economies and developing countries. Maybe you're interested in working for a multilateral organization, or maybe you're interested in some sort of facet of law or international judicial organizations, for example. We also have people that work in upper society of upper level management within various corporations. So what does that mean in terms of jobs? What are the careers? Where do people actually end up working? What are the companies? And what you'll be surprised is that people that pursue degrees in IR, they may not have as much of a linear path as maybe someone that goes to med school, but they do end up in a variety of different organizations. And this is where a degree in IR has changed. So yes, you do get people that want to work for, multilateral organizations and NGOs, but a large number of people end up actually working in the private sector. Companies and corporations need individuals that understand corporate social responsibility, or that can analyze countries and understand what their political situations are, or to understand consulting projects. And so if any of these organizations, and this is by no means limited, what you need to understand is that a degree in IR is a wide brush. And so that sort of takes me to my first question. If any of these professions interest you or get you excited, you will eventually need a graduate degree to pursue these types of professions. You can always get an entry-level position, but what you'll find is very early on, either you don't have enough academic preparation from the university level, or to move up into your organizations, you're going to actually need more practical skill sets, more in-depth learning. And that's where a graduate degree in international relations will be very helpful and useful. So the first thing is, do I need an IR master's degree? Well, for the professions that I've just hired, maybe not at the beginning, but eventually to move up into the field, you will. And so if that's the case, the next question it would be, well, what would be the right program for me? So I think the first question, does the profession you want to pursue require it? And of the fields that I demonstrated, yes. And I think the next question is, you should not apply to graduate school to figure out what you want to do. You should have a general idea. And if you don't have a general idea, this is where I would strongly encourage you to do internships, right? So whether you're doing internships right now during your studies, or whether you're a recent graduate, I would not go to graduate school to figure it out. You should have at least ideally a year or two of experience. I would strongly encourage gap years, because you may change your idea, may change your mind, but if you've had a year of working in climate change, or had a year working in development, or some sort of organization, that really helps you figure out when you come to school the types of classes that you want to do. So work experience counts. And sometimes, depending on different countries, sometimes it's challenging to get work experience. Maybe the job market is really difficult. Well, if you can't get work experience, I hope you're volunteering at some interesting organization or working in some sort of government organization. I always get very surprised when I read applications from students in their last year of university that say to me, I want to work at the United Nations. And I say, great. What clubs have you joined? I don't see anything on your CV that shows me government or politics or history clubs. So there are different ways to get experience. And I think the most important thing here is to expose yourself, to try to get experiences, whether it's volunteering or internships or joining clubs outside of your grades, right? Because that's really going to help you tell your story when you start writing your essay. So work experience is incredibly valid and it counts. And I would really, really encourage you, even if you're not sure about applying to a degree in IR, do an internship. That's going to help you figure out, is it law school that I want to go to? Is it a business that I want to go to? Or is it international relations? And those internships can be really, really important. Something else that's really important to think about when you think about a degree in international relations is where you want to study. Now, obviously, I'm speaking at Education USA. I imagine if you're in this session today, you have an interest in studying in the United States. The United States is a very big country. And as you look at graduate programs in particular, you have to ask yourself, going for a graduate degree in Washington, D.C., or in New York City, or on a campus that's rural, have all great, all of these international relations programs have great professors. But I think a big part of the experience is where you want to be geographically. If you've traveled to the United States, there's a very big culture shift, I would say. We talk about East Coast versus West Coast. America is a very big country. There's a lot in between. Cost of living also varies a lot. So obviously studying in New York City is going to be very different than studying in Iowa. So, these are all things that I would really encourage you to think about when you think about graduate school. Are you looking at an urban setting? Are you looking at a large campus? You should also ask yourself, how long do you want to be studying for? A lot of international relations programs are 2 years long, although if you're very focused, some programs are only a year long. So this is definitely something to think about. And I think something else that you should look at is the student makeup, right? So some programs are very international. They have large international populations. Other programs have, 50-50 and some even less. Another important aspect is looking at where the faculty are. If you're interested in a specific master's program, I would strongly encourage you to look at the professors that teach there. If you're interested, for example, in environment, I would look at what the professors that teach of these programs. Something to also bear in mind is that some programs are what we call practitioners programs, and some programs focus heavily on theory. And I'll get into a second what that means. Something else that's very important and something that American programs do really well is the emphasis on career development. So all graduate programs in international relations will have a career office. Obviously, career offices vary, but a big part of your experience, and as you look at graduate programs, is to understand, what are the career statistics, what are the job employment rates, where do graduates that go to this program, where do they end up? This is all information that I would encourage you to look for when you think about the graduate program that you're interested in. And career offices should publish this information on their website. Now, the cost of a U.S. education is high. However, there are ways to subsidize your education, and the return on investment tends to be pretty immediate. What does that mean? In American graduate programs, there's a very heavy emphasis on job placement, and particularly the types of services that you get. So a lot of career offices will provide career development courses. They'll have employers that will come to campus. Often they have built-in internships and relationships with a lot of different organizations. But they do require planning in advance. And so every program is different. Sometimes programs have very generous funding schemes. Other times the funding schemes, have agreements with different countries. And other times it would require you planning in advance. And so for those of you, for example, that may be interested in going to the United States, I would look into, organizations, and I, look at Fulbright grants, look at opportunities for outside sources of funding. And often American programs will give generous financial aid, but it usually would cover only a portion of tuition. That's not to say that you have to be affluent to go to an American program, not at all, but it does require you usually a year in advance to also explore the different opportunities for funding. So it is doable, but it does require financial planning. And this is something that I would encourage you, as you look at graduate programs, do look at their financial page, see if there's specific scholarships that you can apply to, see what the requirements for those specific scholarships, but don't only rely on the university. Also look at external sources of funding, and very often national funding schemes, whether it's of your own country or bilateral organizations, they do require usually a year in advance of financial planning. Okay, so I mentioned this idea of a practitioner's program. This program that I work at, for example, is what we call a practitioner's program, meaning that we have career academics. So these are professors that teach theories of IR and core courses in international relations. But at the same time, we have individuals that have worked in the field, and we call these practitioners. So these are people that have worked at the UN, the City of London, they work at lobbyist organizations or in the environment, and they come and they teach elective courses. And so when you look at an international relations program, I think the thing you need to ask yourself is your goal to be an academic, meaning one day you want to get your PhD and teach, or is your goal to be a practitioner? If your goal is to be a practitioner, you just need a master's degree, and you should look at master's programs that have opportunities to expose you. If you say to me, no, I want to become a professor of history down the line, well, then you'd probably go for a master's of history. And that's an academic. That means that your courses are academic. You're probably going to be writing a thesis. It's a very different type of program. And usually, if you're pursuing a political science master's program, it usually means that you'll end up in a small master's program, and the focus is on research only. If you want to be a practitioner and work at one of those organizations that I showed at, you should be looking at a practitioner's master's. And so that's why, as you begin this search, it's really important to understand, are you looking for, academic or practitioner's program? And then what are you looking for? Are you looking for a general IR program where you can take some electives? Or are you looking for a very structured program that has very detailed, you take this requirement and that requirement? And again, every program is going to be a little different. So that's why when you begin your research, the best thing you can do is attend info sessions of each of the programs. Obviously, as I mentioned, look at the professional development program. Certain IR programs have a very emphasis on linguistics. So, for example, a program like Johns Hopkins SAIS, we actually require you to be proficient in one of the languages that you want to pursue. So, if you said to me that you want to work in a developing country, by the time you graduate, you would have to be proficient in either Arabic or Portuguese, or obviously Spanish, you don't need that, or French. Other master's programs only require you to take 1 or 2 classes, so the requirement's different. Something else to look at is the role of economics or quantitative skill sets. A program like Johns Hopkins SAIS, for example, even if you want to end up working in human rights, we do require you while you're a student with us to take some economics, and some students like that because it strengthens their ability to be more marketable on the market. Some people say, oh, absolutely not. I don't want to have anything to do with quants, and they're going to look at programs that are very much more liberal arts focused. So again, as you think about international relations programs, you really got to look more specifically at the curriculum of the program. What you will notice in general of IR programs is that they tend to take an interdisciplinary approach, particularly a practitioner's program, where a strong IR program will expose you to a little bit of everything. They'll have some core courses in political science and history and law and economics and business. And I think that is the attraction for a lot of people that pursue IR degrees, is that you're not so narrowed in. You don't have to decide, and you're not taking classes in just one subject area. And that can be very attractive for certain students that want to have this sort of more general interdisciplinary approach. Now, all programs, I think as you think about your graduate journey, again, these are sort of core concepts that I would keep in the back of your mind. They're going to have different weights for each of you, depending on the type of person that you are. But again, you're going to be looking to think about, well, what does this master's program offer me? Do I have the opportunity to take electives? Is there experiential learning? Is there a foreign language requirement? Is it more general? Do I have to have focus areas? So these are themes that, as you approach international relations graduate programs, that I definitely would encourage you to think about. Okay, now with that, the next step is the admissions process. As I mentioned, as you think about graduate school, do your research, do your homework, try to attend as many information sessions as possible. Obviously, every program, every IR program has a slightly different philosophy. And when you attend these info sessions, you'll find out what those is all about. Some programs take a more holistic approach. They may look at the candidate 360. They may understand that you're not perfect. Maybe you had, one semester your grades suffered, but you have really interesting internships. Other graduate programs are very much about the numbers. They're very much about the test scores. They're very much about the GPA. And, they maybe put less emphasis on that holistic approach. And I can't tell you who does what, but, this is something that, as you think about graduate school, there are a number of different resources. So for example, there's a magazine called Newsweek that produces, US News and World Report, that produces rankings every year, and they do go into sort of what each school looks for. Some schools, for example, place more emphasis on academic performance. Other programs are a little bit more flexible and are interested in work experience. And so as you think about the graduate programs, particularly, I would, these reports, these rankings are a good starting point. But I do think, again, you need to think about geography. You need to think about duration, academic only versus practitioners, looking at career services, looking at really what you want to study. Maybe you said maybe you just want to do development or just want to focus on a region of the world. Okay, that's more of a niche program. Maybe you're more of a generalist and would like to take the occasional courses, but want flexibility. So these are all things you need to think about, and it is a process. That being said, although each program is a little different, there are common threads. Most graduate programs will consist of asking you for a recent copy of your CV or resume. And this really should just be a page at this point in your life, where you went to school, what your major was, maybe your internships, volunteer experiences. They will normally ask you for samples of writing. And so every school is different. Sometimes they ask you for, a motivation statement. Sometimes they want to see writing samples. Here, what I would say is, it's really important when you submit these essays and these writing samples, if they're asking you your motivation letter, personalize it, right? Talk about a professor that interests you at this program. Because, we know when you use the same essay for 5 different programs and just change the title. So the more you personalize it, the more you talk about, wow, I attended this information session and I did a site visit and I'm fascinated by the literature that this professor produces. And I'm really impressed where your graduates end up. That's a really personal essay. Analytical essays, when they ask for it, they really just want to see that you're ready to write at a graduate level. Now, if English is not your native tongue, we're not grammar teachers here. We do want to see that an essay is well written. And really where we are going to look at your level of English is going to be the TOEFL or the IELTS or the Cambridge scores. So those are going to be required unless you went to, in most cases, unless you went to a university in an English-speaking country for 3 years at least. Most programs, the cutoffs vary. For a program like ours at SAIS, you need at least a 7 TOEFL. We sent the last 2 years, at least 100 TOEFL, at least a 7 IELTS or B2 Cambridge. So these are things that if you haven't taken these exams, it's really important that you do take this exam. We do look at transcripts. Again, all graduate programs are familiar with the national transcripts of your home country. So we know certain countries grade inflate while other countries are tougher on applicants. Letters of recommendation is something that is important. I would say every school is different. Schools that are more theory-based are going to place more emphasis on letters of recommendation from professors. Practitioners programs want usually one from a professor that you studied with and one ideally from a supervisor that you did a work experience with. Some programs conduct interviews. Again, that's optional. Something to mention is that the GRE or GMAT are these standardized tests. In recent years, the GRE is not a required data point. I would say that, if the program doesn't requirement, I wouldn't be concerned about it. I would only, if you happen to be someone that's really good at taking tests, especially quantitative, the GRE can help you. If a lot of programs, and again, you're going to have to read the culture of what they place emphasis on. A program like SAIS, we prefer that you take an economics course than a GRE, because that's going to be a better indicator for us if you're going to be comfortable doing entry-level economics with us. And again, I mentioned this at the very beginning, familiarize yourself with the financial aid programs, familiarize yourself with the culture, the tuition, and how much aid these programs give. Okay, So I've mentioned this. I'm just going to summarize here. Obviously, CV, writing samples, transcripts, standardized test, English proficiency test, and recommenders. When you choose your recommenders, particularly professors, they tend to be very busy. So as a courtesy, once you decide what graduate program you want to apply to, I would strongly give these professors maybe bullet points, maybe remind them the classes that you took, the papers that you wrote that you did really well in. Give them, I would say, a template that they can build off of. Obviously, we want them to write their letters on official stationery with their, signatures, but definitely prep the professors because we do read these letters and they do give us more of a 360 perspective. And if there is an interview, don't feel that the interview is scary. I think in most programs, we just want to get to know you as a person. And so if you do have the opportunity to interview, it's a great way for you to get to know the program, for the school to get to know you, but also remember, it's a great way for you to get to know the school. Okay. Now, with that, I've talked a little bit about the money part, and I know this is could be an awkward conversation. It's not an awkward conversation. Plan financially. Again, I keep on getting back to this. It is possible to study in the United States. You just need to plan in advance. As you look at programs and you look at the cost of tuition and financial aid, try to figure out, on average, what is the tuition that these schools give out? What are external fellowships that you could look at, plan early? I will say that education is a long-term investment. So particularly the return on investment, particularly for US programs is very, it's actually quantified. A lot of these programs will have the employment surveys and they'll have stats about how much their graduates make. It's not necessarily, you want to do well financially, but it's also, it's about the job where you want to be, what are these, is this a school that's a feeder into the career that you want to go into? And also how deep and how powerful is the alumni network? Now, briefly, before we head to Q&A, I just want to briefly talk about where I work. So I work at Johns Hopkins University. Now, the University of Johns Hopkins is an American program. It's based in Baltimore, Maryland. It's the first research university in the United States. A lot of people know us as a medical program because our first research division was a medical school, but we're actually 9 academic divisions. And so I work at the graduate program of Johns Hopkins. It's called the School of Advanced International Studies. So there's the Johns Hopkins University, which is made up of these different divisions. And I'm at a graduate division that focuses on international studies. So my graduate school was founded in 1943 in Washington, D.C. That's actually where our largest campus is. And it was started at the time, obviously, when World War II was happening in Europe. And our founding fathers were American statesmen who wanted to bring men and women together to look and teach IR and international economics and foreign languages. About 10 years later, though, it was really important for us to have a presence in Europe. And so that's what makes sort of my program very special, is that we actually have 3 campuses in total. So we have the campus in the United States, and students can start in Europe and end in the United States, or start in China and end up in the United States. But we've had a campus here where I'm based in Bologna. For those of you that may know, Bologna is in northern Italy. It's home to the oldest university in the world, the University of Bologna. And so it's a very sort of academic community. Our campus has about 200 students from 40 different nationalities. You don't need to know Italian to come study at SAIS Europe or an American institution, but we also have small classes. And we also have a 3rd campus in China. So if you have a proficiency in Chinese, or you've studied Chinese at the university, you may be a great candidate to do a year in China, for example, and maybe finish your studies in the United States. All of our programs have ample scholarships. But again, if you are interested in SAIS, we have lots of upcoming virtual sessions that are hosted once a month. And I would encourage you to stay in touch. And with that, I'm actually going to stop sharing.